Welcome to another inspiring episode of the Elite Expert Insider Podcast. Hosts Melanie Johnson and Jenn Foster are the owners of Elite Online Publishing. They're both Wall Street Journal, USA Today best-selling authors. We're really glad you're here because this podcast was designed for you. Meet industry experts that share their secrets and strategies. Get successful results for your business in money, relationships, health, and your life. Each episode is going to inspire you to take action towards reaching your greatness.
Hey, it's Melanie Johnson. Thanks for joining us. I've got Jenn Foster here. Hey, Jenn.
Hey, everyone. How's it going?
All right. So we have another great show. First, I want to remind you to subscribe to our podcast and share it with friends because we always have fabulous, incredible, inspiring, and educational information here. So remember to do that. And remember, if you're looking to write a book, publish a book, look us up at Elite Online Publishing and see if you're qualified to work with us. So if you've been having hiring inconsistencies, your accounting maybe is kind of a mess. You're not sure what you should be doing with your team building and training. And you're looking at your profits, but maybe you're not looking at them at the right way. We have the right person here for you today. We've got Vinnie Fisher. He has written 2 books, actually 3 books and 1 on the way. So he is an expert and he's going to come and talk with us and dispel all of that and uncover all the mysteries behind it. Thanks, Vinnie, for joining us today.
Oh, Melanie, thanks for that very kind introduction. Thanks for having me.
Yep.
Great. Well, Vinnie, tell us a little bit how you got started and how you got into your industry.
You know, I'm actually a problem solution marketer, right? So I see problems in my life, usually was where they start. And then I look to a solution. And when it doesn't exist, I go out and quickly build it. And so I'm not a accountant by trade. I'm a lawyer by trade, but I really early on in my, I guess, journey of ownership, entrepreneurship, I realized I'm an excellent starter, have a high aptitude for client behavior, but I'm an awful finisher. And so I realized real quickly I had to have people around me who are far better at those things than I am. So because of some of my gifting, I actually have a pretty solid ability to be around people. I like people for their uniqueness. And so I think that coupled with my inherent laziness allowed me to be good at building team because I don't want to do something twice and I get a little flaky and on to something else. Thank goodness I have finishers. And so because of that, you know, we had a couple successful companies and I learned a trend where I kept building great things, but then giving a bunch of it back. And just one day I woke up with this somewhere like a cold sweat, but was like, oh my gosh, it's not about how much I bring at the top. It's what's left on the bottom. And that might sound simple to people, but it's what woke me up to kind of get off that crazy cycle of keep creating these. And it's so arrogant of me to say this, but keep creating these 8-figure businesses that leave us with dribbles at the end. And you know, most people can't even create a 7-figure business. And I was on the process of breaking my 3rd 8-figure one when we decided that was going to change. And so it did. And we had a wonderful health company that we exited from an 8-figure position. And from that, we built the bones of Fully Accountable because we went out looking for it in the marketplace and what we wanted didn't exist. And so I just wanted something different. I built it from an owner's perspective, not an accountant's perspective, because I'm not one of those. And here we are 7 years later, looking like an overnight success.
So what's the difference between an owner's perspective and an account's perspective?
Yeah, I think, you know, if you have problems you need to solve, I think an accountant or a vendor is looking at from the production of the work they do. I was wanting an output. So, you know, we live in the digital world. So we have a lot of high transactions coming. So I needed tangible data I can make decisions on, at least a working set of data. It didn't have to be perfect, but something I can make real decisions on now. I didn't want to report 45 days from now where I already bled to death 45 days ago. I needed something very quickly. And so an accountant wanted the books to be clean and tight and needy and hand them to me all like clean. And I'm like, I'll take it rough and dirty. I just need something right now. I want to know if the spend I'm putting in our CPM is real. And if not, what can I do to course correct today, not after my bank account's empty?
Mm-hmm.
That makes total sense. And you talk about, you know, a lot of companies, they have a hard time building team and scaling team. Yeah. What are some tips on doing that?
I had to first get right with myself, right? Because I'm a quick start and I can go fast. I might not have much in the CPU, but it spins quickly, so I can go pretty quickly. And I would lean on myself because I would trust that. So along the way, I had to first realize that I'm a lightning bolt to the tree, and I come in and see things I didn't like, and I would disrupt it at the level of too much disruption, or might be considered an overcorrection. So I kind of, at least for myself, came comfortable with this like 70% rule I wrote about in one of my books called The CEO's Mindset. And it was me waking up one day realizing I need to stop being the lightning bolt in my company. And can I live with a 70% version of something? Is 70% enough for us to move forward? And, with some therapy and good coffee, I got to the point where I had to live with that gap of where I might consider getting it done versus what's actually getting done. And the more I matured in that, I gave room for really smart, intelligent, dynamic people to do something better than I was even capable of doing it.
Yeah, you talk about the CEO mindset, and you said, I think earlier in the pre-call, that you have a specific way of like a formula. Tell us a little bit more about that book and what it entails.
Well, I think, thank you for that. I think everyone needs to know that I think all personalities can improve in leadership. And I think that you need to know some things about the way you're inherently gifted in who you are. Every personality brings to the table its own unique aspects to that. And we all have different gifting. Well, I think along that, I realized I'm a people over systems type person. Now, I'm a little chaotic. I certainly don't struggle with perfectionism. But I tend to like people, and inherently it shows in my actions more than I like process or system. So I've built a people-centric business. Some people are very process-driven, and they would look at this same advice through a process-driven system. And so early on, I realized I need to work at helping to maturate the right people in my organization. So I work very hard on things like I want trust over performance. So in my environment, what's important to us is that. So I'm cultivating and helping people with character and integrity and commitment. So our core values are caring, competent, and committed. And then recently this year, we just added community because I think we earned that. You don't just claim it. And so I work on the people part of our business. And thank goodness our COO, and we have, I have a couple operating companies, and I'm the chairman of the board of those. And each of our COOs, thankfully, are more process people. But that's because I'm more of an EQ person. But if I was an organization that was more of a process leader, I would look for more EQ type leadership, because that would want to fill in the deficit of what's missing from my level.
That sounds great. Let's dive into some of the strategies of running a business, like you talk in your other book, False Profit. You talk about tax strategies, targets, establishing a reserve. Tell us some of the tax strategies that you give to businesses that most of them maybe aren't doing.
Yeah, the first and most obvious thing that most people don't realize is that what's built for big business organizationally is really what should work for small business. But because of lack of resources or lack of availability or clients desiring to pay for certain things, we don't treat them like we do. We don't treat our small business like we do our big business. And what I mean by that is, from a tax perspective, this should wake everybody up. The average owner of a business is spending between $40,000 and $80,000 a year unnecessarily in tax that they shouldn't pay. IRS loves to produce this information. They also don't give us the check back. They just like to produce the information. Well, one of the things we discovered in there is the obviousness that a business, and one of the core things we do at Fully Accountable, is the business should first be handled for tax efficiency, then the owner. But most small businesses roll everything to like the flow through to their 1040. And how you know that is your CPA in December says, all right, so let's talk about the planning thing we're going to do for you guys. And a comment will come, well, what about this stuff for the business? Oh, let's do that next year. It's too late now, but that's a great idea for next year. And so the pandemic of that is that a business isn't running for its own tax efficiency before you get to the owner. It's like a double dip, but a legitimate design double dip of our system. You're missing the tax efficiency at the business level before you get to the personal level. And so first and foremost, that is the biggest problem happening in small business. And then from there, we have, we love to provide this as a gift, but, at fullyaccountable.com/elite, we can certainly change that if that's not the best one for you. But we have a gift where we have advice on tax tips. And we also have links to our books and stuff. And we would love to give that to your community. But on there, we kind of lay out this, I had one of our CFOs put together, here are the tax tips at the personal and business level we highly recommend you take advantage of.
I think that's great, because a lot of times business owners just assume their CPA is telling them everything that they need to know, and they're not, and they don't know anything about accounting, so they don't know what the tax laws are, or if they're taking advantage of all of the benefits that are provided for them, right?
Yeah, and I think actually, Jen, you make a great point. CPAs are actually pretty good at their job, but depending on that person's personality, they tend to be a little bit more risk adverse. So instead of giving counsel to the client based on their temperature and desire for risk, it usually comes through their temperature and desire for risk. And then couple that with, I think, a worse problem, the margin or the money spent on taxes for the work done is mostly spent on preparation, not planning. Those are separate functions. And so, I think what happens is the CPA runs out of time. They're just doing the work and they don't really have much left in kind of their time for margin to do planning. And I think if you have a business aspect to doing it and then personal, and you divide some of that, there is margin for some of that. But unfortunately, the system's designed more towards preparation than it is planning.
Mm-hmm. And that's why they tell you, let's just do that next year, because they don't want to redo it.
Yeah,
because
it's funny. The professional in me, that lawyer who desires personal and professional development, I get offended by that, right? Because path of least resistance, I feel like professionals should do better at that. So I'm actually even always battling. We have a good sized team here at Fully Accountable, but I'm always battling that perspective of that's another form. Well, that's the wrong answer. And I'm not trying to knock the industry, but sadly, I learned early on that we can do about 50% of what we promise, and we're going to outperform most people in this industry.
What about you say about having the end in mind? What does that mean for businesses?
One of the things I think people do, and I think I was guilty of it early in my career, and I got to guard against it now to make sure I don't do this, but because I'm very susceptible to run with something real quickly and then evaluate value to the end user or to why we're doing something. And so I don't think enough of us stop and ask questions. I'm a big Peter Drucker fan, right? So one of his books, Effective Executive, great read. If you haven't read it, highly recommend it. But he's always asking questions about where am I? Well, he's dead now, so he's a mentor from the grave, but he's still a great guy. And he always, where are you sitting in the most valuable position in your organization? What you're doing, those things change. And so you should always be re-asking that question. And so just happened the other day, one of our marketing team came in, wants to build a new lead magnet funnel to one of our benchmarking reports. And I'm like, what do we hope to accomplish with this? And I got a blank stare. I'm like, man, we're going to build this wrong if we can't answer that question. And so I think a lot of people could look to see what, if we get exactly what we want, what are we hoping to produce? And most people don't ask it of themselves or of what they're doing. And boy, you could save a lot of money and maybe some overdevelopment if you ask a couple of those either throughout the process or better during the early phases of it.
Yeah, I really like
they're painful too. You're asking that question, you're like, well, I don't know, why are you asking me this? We're just going to do it. And you're like, but why? Why do we still need this software? Why do we still need to be doing this campaign? Or why do we need to have this URL still in our system? But I'm attached to it. I like it. We have it.
Well, that benchmarking example that I'm referring to, so version 1 of it was to take more of a templated version of what we produce for the client and then offer it real cheap. And I'm like, okay, we could do that. What are we going to get? What kind of lead are we going to get? And they're like, well, we'll get more leads. I'm like, so we're going to fill up our account executives with phone calls of people who aren't going to be our clients. Like, oh, good point. We hadn't thought about that. I'm like, so maybe we should think about who we're trying to attract with that lead. And that's my point about you go out and build something, you build exactly what you don't want because you haven't struggled with, if you build it, what's going to come. And so I just think if some more people in the organization could at least push back and think that way, I'm convinced that if the executive level could eat their own dog food, I think that can permeate through the organization.
Mm-hmm. I like that, keeping the end in mind. I've heard some people that will keep asking more and more questions like, well, once you get that, once you have that you're wanting at the end, and what will that provide for you? Like what's after that? Like, and what does that get you? And what does that get you? And kind of keep asking those questions until you're realizing really what you want and then for the end. Like,
I've seen like a good wealth managers do that. Like, oh, so you're going to make more money. And then what? And then what? And then what? And you're like, hey, Freud, I'm not looking for you to, but really, honestly, it's forcing you to think about a strategy that could actually work. And so Richard Rummel wrote a great book, Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. It's a thick read, but it gets you thinking about this idea of that, what Peter Drucker would refer to as the effective executive. And, in CEO's mindset, I wrote it from a perspective of real world on the ground, what it looks like to run a dynamic organization with a lot of people. And I can't tell you how many times lack of strategy usually is one of sadly, the diseases of failure.
Mm-hmm.
One of the, kind of with the end in mind, you also talk about reverse engineering things. Yeah. And then also, the numbers don't lie. Kind of walk us through that, because I think those are aha moments for a lot of people.
Well, I tell you, I would have loved younger Vinnie to know marketing by math, right? Like there's only so much room in there for this emotional piece to it, because the numbers don't lie. It tells on you. And I wish I would have had a better relationship to the numbers being produced to me, or an attitude to want to produce the numbers. I had to early on realize that the core indicators that are relevant to my industry or the company that we're operating, I should, as the CEO, have a good working knowledge of the ones that are the most important. And I didn't even have like cocktail napkin math, like access to any of those. And I think that was an indictment of my immaturity in leadership at that time. And it's fair. I take that hit because it allowed me to, thankfully, deal with that and build an entire company around that issue. Because of course I overdo everything. But I think I think that reverse engineer part of it could help a lot of people in business. Like if you set out to sell something, a service or a product, and you sell it to a couple people, of course your friends and family are going to love what you do. But where is the research in seeing, early on I realized I'm a good salesman. I can sell stuff. And so we built sales organizations and we sold stuff. Somewhere along the way, I realized that's actually not the key to building a valuable business. I think a value proposition-based business, something that is actually solving a problem for the end user with that kind of mindset, is where reverse engineering is the best tool. Because at that point, you're like, if Fully Accountable broke right now, a lot of people would be scrambling and hurt. And it's a definition, these awards and all the stuff we get are just an outpouring of the value proposition to our client base. And so reverse engineering is what actually led me to get to that point.
That's great. Can you give us an example of like reverse engineering something, or one of your clients or something? Give us an example.
So we produce a thing like a daily report. And so, in the world where I live, the digital world, most of your transactional revenue comes off credit cards. And so that means you have a lot of merchant account volume if you're a big company, like things hitting your bank. And I had come up with the idea one day, what would be really cool is why don't we actually log in to banks and then produce a daily report of all the deposits that come out of there? And they're like, oh, it's a great idea. And so one of the people in our department, because we have this attitude of ask, like, how are we going to do that? What are we going to get out of it? Said, well, how do you connect to the banks? That technology doesn't exist. And this was 7 years ago. And she was right. That technology didn't exist. And so we realized the pain it was going to take to manually log in and produce that report. And I said to them, I promise you, let's look into what's the number one problem someone has with merchant accounts. So we started talking to merchant account providers, the people who give us the ability to collect Visa and MasterCard. And they came back and said, most people are missing some of their deposits in their bank. We're like, oh my gosh, this thing might work. And so today it's one of the cornerstones of our business because we went and did the research to find out, will that daily report solve a problem? And I tell you right now, if we shut that off, we'd have some very upset clients.
Well, and that's a great problem to solve because, people don't look at their statements. People don't look at their bank accounts every single day. And you just assume that you're getting the deposits that you need or that you're expecting. And
well, the core part of there is something that you wouldn't even do. Like you could look at your bank account statement, like think of all the transactions going through, but reconciling them or what they call grossing them up, which is a real fancy accounting stuff, but it's going out and backing out that information. It's real work. It's hard. Nobody, definitely not the guy talking, does that. And so that was the problem that we actually set out to solve, which was reconciling the account. Now that early indicators are about deposits, but the reconciling of the account catches the missed deposits.
Yeah. And if you're running an e-commerce business, my son was doing e-commerce for, and you're getting so many transactions. It's just boom, 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 boom. And you don't know if you had 150 transactions that day, you're not sure if you got 150 deposits.
It's just so many moving parts, and it's not. And software has this, agencies have this. Education companies, like when you're digital, it's so cool that you can have access to your prospective clients through digital media. But the other side of that means there's so thank goodness for things like APIs and the improvement of technology, because we've only been able to use that to get better at what we do. But that's probably one of my favorite. I have a bunch of them, Jen, but that's probably my favorite. Like, let's make sure this actually is something that's going to produce value, because it was a problem I had. I wanted to make sure other people had the problem. And that's the mistake I think people make. They think they have a problem, that everyone else has it. And they didn't look in to see if the problem was bigger than just themselves.
Yeah.
Talk about solving for X that you talk in one book. I don't think we've covered that yet. How do you?
It's the key to actually media, right? So I had this all wrong. And so solving for X is, what's the bottom amount of money I can spend to acquire a customer? And so there's it's chapter 2 of False Profits. I would highly recommend. Every book has a principle. That's the principle of that book. The principle of CEO's mindset is about how to have people, right? The principle to False Profits is all about solving for X. And I reverse engineered my own little formula. What I was doing wrong was starting with what our type of business, at the time, a health supplement company, should expect as a margin for profit. It was never in the formula. I would just try to acquire to zero. And most e-commerce, digital, consumer brand companies are just trying to loss leader acquire the client. When I plugged in an expected margin of our industry, it changed the formula, and it left me, in that case, figuring out I could spend about 40 cents of every dollar to acquire the customer. If I spent 41, I wasn't profitable. Anything less than 40, I had room. I also learned that if I spent under 30 cents a dollar, I probably was attracting the wrong customer. So it gave me this amazing benchmark of how to actually spend marketing dollars to acquire our customers. And so today, with the shutdown of the world and more adoption online, more now than ever, solving for X is so critical, because it used to be convince people to buy online. Now it's, can I make sure I'm profitable in the process?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so many times too, we forget that number. We're hey, our product cost is this. We have a widget. It cost us $100. We're selling it for $500, so we make $400. But not necessarily true. It costs you a certain amount to acquire the customer to get that.
And then, in addition, I think in my world, what I sadly was okay with, in my mind, spending 100 cents of 100 cents on the dollar to acquire the customer, because I believed in something far worse, that customer was going to stick around for a long enough time for me to justify blowing my margin on acquisition. And so I didn't really know how long they were sticking around. I was just hoping and rubbing Buddha and hoping that would happen. And that wasn't accurate. And I saw a great presentation by the founder of LegalZoom, who said, someone asked him a question: is profit or capital more important? And he said, a company should only be focused on profit unless they have the sufficient capital to not focus on profit. And I'm like, that's actually quite interesting. So it's capitalized companies can focus on acquiring customers at a, even dollar because they have a bigger, longer view of the client relationship. Most small to medium-sized businesses, 82% of them exactly run out of cash trying to execute on their vision.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's so true. Tell us again where people can go to get your gift, Vinnie.
Yeah, so they can go to fullyaccountable.com/elite, and they'll be able to download all the wonderful things we have, like access to our books and some tax information. And so how to actually operate the office of your business and all the things needed to go and excel at your business. And so we have all that there for you.
That's great. Thank you. We'll have the fullyaccountable.com link on the show notes as well as on the YouTube and on our blog.
Awesome.
It'll be probably in our newsletter too. Well, thanks for coming, Vinnie. What a wealth of information. I know I took notes. I feel smarter already just by being here with you. So thanks for coming. And remember to subscribe to our podcast, share it with your friends, because we always have something wonderful for you here. And again, if you're looking to write a book and become an author, reach out to us at eliteonlinepublishing.com. Go to the submission form and fill that out, and we'll get in touch with you and see if we're a good fit. We'll see you next time. Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.
Hey, are you looking to increase your revenue, build credibility, and elevate your brand? This podcast is brought to you by Elite Online Publishing, an innovative publishing and full spectrum marketing company. They will publish and market your book to make it a #1 bestseller. Becoming an author is the best way to market your business. So contact them at eliteonlinepublishing.com today. All of their authors become #1 bestsellers.